Welcome to another episode of the Concrete Logic Podcast. And today I have Dr. Jon Belkowitz. He's back. And we're going to talk about the true cost of Type 1L cement and these new cements, or no?
No.
I took that the wrong way. What are we going to talk about today?
The excessive cost of low carbon concrete.
Oh, that sounds better.
Because what that does is if it's all inclusive, all. The Type 1L cements, the 323, Michigas, the whole political aspect of it. Well, what were you supposed to do? I think all of that. And today I really, I wanted to be specific.
Okay.
I put an article together. If you don't mind sharing your screen, I could share mine. Let me share my screen. Is that okay?
Yeah. Do you mind if I remind everybody what they can do to support the podcast?
I'll shut up. Go for it. Yeah, and open your wallets. Stop buying that Zin stuff. Get the cheaper stuff and donate some money. Don't even donate. Become a member because Wait, sorry, you were supposed to do. I thought I was.
Oh, that's all right. Well, we got a few things going on. No, I appreciate you get excited when I start talking about this. But anyways, so going back to this, how you can support the Concrete Logic podcast. There's several ways. The first way is if you enjoy the podcast, please share it with a colleague or a coworker or whoever else. Maybe just blast everybody on your email list. Just send it out to everybody, and somebody will pick it up. That's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is if you go to concretelogicpodcast.com on the homepage, there's a couple ways you can get a hold of me. There's a contact link up at the top of the page. And then at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a little microphone. You can click on that, and that will record right off of your computer. And what I'm looking for there, and I want to thank there was a whole bunch of people this past week or so that have reached out in this fashion. And what they were doing was suggesting topics or guests that they would like to hear on the show. So please do that. That helps the podcast immensely. And then the last way you can help out is on the same concretelogicpodcast.com homepage. There's a donate button, and you click on that, and it takes you to a PayPal checkout, and you can put any dollar amount you want in there, and that supports the podcast as well. To pay for, like I shared, I think on the last episode, that there's software and editing stuff and hardware, microphones and other things that you need for to put on a podcast. So it helps pay for all those things. Or like the newer intro. I think people are like the new intro versus me talking. They got a professional on there talking. So yeah, it pays for things like that. So
I didn't like that as much. I thought you were just fine.
Well, I can't make everyone happy. Yep. So those are the ways you can support the show. You can also check out concretelogicacademy.com, where we're creating essentially a network of folks that want to expand their concrete knowledge, and we're starting to put classes there that you can actually get professional development hours as well.
I just finished those.
Yes, you did.
Those were freaking awesome. I recommend for the PEs out there that you hate going through classes because they suck. And just to let you know, most of the classes out there are the worst. These were easy to get through, so good job.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, and we're hoping to get some Dr. John's classes on there as well. So keep an eye out for that. All right, let's get into the topic at hand. Dr. Jon, excessive cost of low carbon concrete. Did you want to share? You're going to share your article there?
Right there.
Yep.
Unless I'm already sharing it. Here you go. Oops.
Yep.
Give me 2 more seconds. For those of you who try to share an article from LinkedIn to get rid of the comments on the right-hand side, just go into the edit function, and it gives you a widescreen view of your article. So, Seth, you and I and Rich, and a few other people have been talking about low carbon concrete and the implications of this, sprint to the finish that we've been doing with our industry. And, I try not to point fingers and get upset too much. It's just part of my business to say, okay, where are our issues? What are the root causes of our problems? And that's pointing a finger. But in this case, I'm pointing, our discussion, it's going directly at the 595 cements. But, you to a degree, you have to feel bad for the cement industry. I mean, for a good 2 years, year and a half, the cement industry was put under the microscope by Bill Gates and, a book he wrote, and then an article that CNN wrote about how, cement is the worst material in the world, and it's melting the polar ice caps, and it's killing penguins. And, we have to get rid of cement tomorrow. So in response, there was this knee-jerk reaction, and now we're in this place with these 595 cements, this low-carbon concrete, Michigas. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, is something really specific. And I wrote an article. I don't want to read the flipping article, but I think you had a gentleman on from ACCS, Mr. Hernandez.
Yep, Mike.
And that's why I was scrolling through the Concrete Logic podcast. I was trying to look for his podcast, because I think they're the only organization that is starting to put both short and long-term data together. Is that a fair assessment, that you guys had a podcast that reviewed some of that information that they're putting together?
Yeah, that was, I believe, episode 92.
Okay.
Yep. And he was looking for some help from people to submit not just mixes that weren't working, that they were having issues with, but more of the ones that were successful with. So they were gathering all that data. I think they're still working on it, that they're doing it with ACI.
Reach out. I'm just going to reach out to Mike Hernandez, ACCS, low carbon, and then the type 1L.
Yep.
We started talking about this before the show, and, should we talk about this? We've talked about it enough ad nauseum, and it is a hot topic right now. The reason why I wanted to talk to you is because the phone calls and the work that we've been getting, and we're a part of the projects, and I use the Department of Transportation as a barometer. It's not a barometer, it's the bar.
Yeah,
right?
That makes sense.
Well, the crazy thing about the DOT part of the concrete industry, it's like, the residential industry on steroids, right? They expect their concrete at the lowest cost, right? It's all about dollars, and normally they put limitations on pound per cubic yard, or not only the mix design, but the cost, and how you can hire people, and the hourly rate that you hire them at. So it's not easy working with DOTs. And then there are some DOTs that, and I don't know if you've experienced this, that if you come short with your compressive strength, let's say 800 to 1,000 PSI in your cylinders, and if they do cores and the cores to some degree match that, they're going to back charge you, or in some cases for the shortening of life of the concrete. And then in some cases they might make you R&R, rip and replace it. And that wasn't a common thing that was used, but now there are at least 6 DOTs that we work with that, and far be it from me to give out their names and air their dirty laundry, but they've had to truncate, and they have great maintenance programs, great concrete programs, but they've had to truncate their maintenance programs by a decade or two because some of the issues with these new 595 cements. Now, Seth, is that a surprise to you that information, the number of DOTs, and, obviously you've got to believe what I'm saying, and I'm not bullshitting you, but
Yeah.
right?
It's on one hand, the number of DOTs it is shocking to me. But on the other hand, I'm not surprised that people are having issues because like you said, we've talked about it plenty, and we kind of, through the podcast have documented some issues that along the way. But I'm surprised. Well, I would say that people are thinking decades down the road, and they're already shortening the life of whatever whatever infrastructure they're putting. That seems extreme, but I guess if you could share what are the problems that they're seeing, and I guess why? Because I read through your article, and it's all the things that we talked about, how you can mitigate these new challenges with the new cements. Are they doing these things? Are they and just not seeing the results, or it's, I guess, explain more.
The latest and greatest conversation I had was surprised, and there was, some lack of knowledge that there had been a change of cements at all. And please bear in mind, I'm talking about DOT level. And it was almost as if, like, you find out that your wife's been cheating on you, right? Like we didn't know. Like, what? Who was going to tell us? Like, our job is to just make specifications, recommendations. Then we disseminate it down the line. Like, we're not concrete experts. We're civil engineers. We don't get into the chemistry of it, and that's to a certain degree, they're absolutely right. But then the question turns into, I know everybody else is having the same problem. I drive from state to state, and here, there, they have the same. Why am I the only one asking about it? Why am I the only one throwing up their arms like, what happened? We put this concrete in 2-3 years ago. If I was told anything, it was at a conference, I had a lunch, and I was told, hey, it's a 1-to-1. So
initially, well, I would jump in there and say the initial information shared by the cement producers was 1-to-1, but I think we got past that, right? We got people start realizing that.
You don't get past that when the people who are working on the designs and specifications, they only go out to a conference once a year.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
You and I are on the heartbeat of this subject, not just every day, but man, I'm reading it over the weekends. There was just a paper published in Concrete Canada or Concrete UK. I shared it this morning. It's on the printer. As soon as I get done with this, I have a cup of decaf waiting to be made so I can sit down and read that 2.5-page article that looks flipping awesome, but normal people don't do that. I'm stealing a part of like something else that I need to do to like sneak away and read this. And I'm going to try to read it as in depth as possible in the window I have. But most people who operate in the construction industry, it's no fail trust. Daniel McCoy is a frequent guest on the show. He works with Speedway Concrete. He understands concrete mix design, cement chemistry, concrete admixtures, the tarantula curve by the great Tyler Lay, concrete pumping, and how it deals with cement paste and admixtures. And that being said, when he is in a briefing with a major project and somebody asks him about the type of concrete that he's going to use and is he concerned about it, he looks at his concrete producer, Stephen Crawford from Speedway, and he says, Steven, are we good? Steven says, yep, we're good. Dan says, no, I don't got any problems with that. And that's the way it should be. There should be this no-fail trust, right? There is something to be said for there is a responsibility across the board, and I won't deny that. But to a certain degree, if I'm going to understand where the cement industry came from, like, hey, we had to do something, I can also understand part of the civil and construction engineering side of the industry that said, holy moly guacamole, where did this come from? And what they're dealing with is concrete that's supposed to be 20 years old or looks 20 years old, acting like it's 20 years old, and it's 2 years old.
Yeah. Well, the threat of whatever they call them, CO2 taxing or whatever, that's what I was told is why they had to do something, and that's why they panicked, and that's why it all got pushed out so quickly, because of the threat of those.
I understand that's the excuse that I teed up.
Yeah.
We had to do something. And I've listened to a lot of these ACI 323 presentations done by Matt Adams and a few other folk, and a knee-jerk reaction, I get it, but to put such restraint and such boundary conditions on the industry is foolhardy at best. And now we're starting to see the teeth of this ugly monster that we've created. When we talk about DOTs, I said it's like the residential industry on steroids. When we commit to DOT projects, they're not short loads.
Yeah.
Right? They're not 3 and 5 yards. Right? We're talking thousands of cubic yards over miles that are lanes wide and more than 6 inches thick. Like, there's a commitment level here that, we should have done a lot more thorough homework. So I guess I need to say where I'm going with this. And
yeah, well, they measure the global warming potential,
GWP. I think that's a approximation.
So that all that stuff, the CO, reduction of carbon, all that stuff is measured at the time of construction. They don't even look beyond that.
They don't, and that's part of Matt's presentation. Is what's different between over the big blue pond is there's like 6 or 9 sections of a concrete job site or construction site. We're only working 1 through 3, which is basically raw material to the gate. And once we hit that gate, clock stops. We don't care anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the calculation. It's not a measurement; it's a calculation that we're running. And again, that's very foolhardy, where it's one control point. We're not looking down the road to see what impacts our decisions are having on concrete. And this is not one of those things. I've been bringing new technologies into the concrete industry since I had a full head of majestic hair, Seth. And the classic question that I get from engineers is, where's your 5 years worth of data? Show me a structure that's been in place for 10 years. The crazy thing about this cement conversation, Rich loves doing this to me. You still there? Did I hang up on you?
No, you're still here.
Rich loves doing this to me. Before we can get in the conversation, John, let's start defining some things. I don't know if you know this, but Rich was a professor at Texas A&M. And I think he might have been a kindergarten teacher, because he sometimes talks to me like I'm 4 or 5 years old. Like, let's define things first, John. Right? And the 595, people haven't read the flipping ASTM, and they call it a limestone cement. You can't do that. That is a misconception, especially with, we have an EPD for this cement now, but the reality is that cement is ever changing. The great Thomas Adams, president of the American Coal Ash Association, just gave a presentation on the benefiting of blended fly ashes. You substitute fly ash for cement in that entire presentation. Our cement now, it's not a limestone cement. It's a hodgepodge of fine Portland, some fine limestones. That's an inert material. I don't care what people try to sell you on. It is an inert material. And then you got all these chemicals that nobody has to tell you about. They don't have to tell you what's in the mix. They don't have to tell you what's in the blend. 595, the title of it. Can you scroll up? Oh, this is me. I have to scroll.
That's you.
Stop it. Be nice. Kid woke up at 4 o'clock this morning puking.
Oh, man.
It's a blended cement. It's not a hydraulic limestone cement. It's not a Portland cement. It's a blended cement that they only have to give you 5 bits of information. And with that, what the industry has seen, and if you're seeing this too, you don't have to contact us. There are so many versions of intelligent concrete out there nowadays. God bless. Early age and later age cracking, I call it premature cracking. Well, John, premature cracking doesn't necessarily, especially at the soft surface, doesn't go back to the strength of the concrete. No shit. Excuse my language. This is a family-rated show. There was a wonderful book written by Peter Taylor. Did you read that book yet? I told you to read that book.
It's not ringing a bell.
Curing Concrete.
Oh, yeah.
Curing Concrete. I tore this flippin' book apart. And if you guys don't know who Peter Taylor is, shame on you. Read this book. In this book, Peter, they said, send an author or send a poet. This book is effing amazing. Peter says in this book, and of course I'm not going to find it, is that the surface of our concrete pavements, bridge deck slabs, dams, locks, levees, spillways, taxiways, runways, what have you, has nothing to do with the concrete strength. And everything to do with the aesthetics. Who cares, John? A lot of people care about the aesthetics. But more importantly, the durability and the life cycle of the concrete. And I am only paraphrasing this wonderful author. I recommend this book as part of your library. And you tear it apart with a pen. But the man is not flipping wrong. That the plastic shrinkage, drawing shrinkage, volume change, chemical shrinkage, the dusting at the surface, excessive latience, all that what we get from a change in the water demand of our binding material has a wild impact on a reduction in our concrete service life. I mean, if you look at abrasion resistance, right? Do you have any abrasion resistance samples on your desk?
No.
Okay. I've got a few here. So let's take a look. Here we go. This is a nice one. That's a nice one. I want to have one where you can see the aggregate. Here. Okay. I think we can see that, right?
Yeah.
You got your cement paste, and then this is the trough.
Yep.
From the stone wheels.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, what you're seeing here is there's different phases that the concrete surface goes through when it gets deteriorated by abrasive forces. The first one is the first line of defense, that cementitious cap. Now, here's that cementitious cap, and you can see there's no aggregate in it. Right? Now, John, aggregate is pretty tough. It's tougher than cement paste. Yeah, well, normally when we have aggregate, which is in the trough, we have the interface between the aggregate and the hydrated cement matrix. And if we have a weak hydrated cement matrix, which if you've ever read the A.M. Neville book, the hydrated cement matrix in the body of the concrete is much stronger than the hydrated cement matrix at the interfacial zone between the body of the concrete and the rock. And with that, with abrasion resistance, instead of getting a polishing effect or work hardening effect, we get aggregate that get torn out of our concrete. So if we start out with a cap that is extremely weak and subpar dusting, has more porosity to it, already, premature cracking, then our resiliency to abrasive forces diminishes very quickly. Now you compound that with a lot of DOTs have gone to grooving and not tining. We're prematurely damaging that concrete, where ASTM C150 cements were more forgiving. These blended cements, it's like the rose gold argument. Whitney and I went to a jewelry store, and the young lady behind the counter tried to convince me that the ring I wanted to get, or she wanted to sell me with the rose gold, was more valuable, more precious than a 100% gold ring. And you can't convince me that you're if you take a cross section of rose gold, it's 1% copper and 1% gold. And copper traditionally is a cheaper material. You're selling me a cement that is 10 to 15%. And by the way, when they tell you 10%, normally they mean 11.4%, because that's the standard deviation that they're allowed. So you're taking my glue, my Portland cement, and you're reducing it by a minimum of 8%. Let's be kind to them. In what other effing industry is it better to cut your glue and replace it with an inactive ingredient to get the same results?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's right, because we've been over-designing.
And the concrete structural engineering industry has been assuming that we're only getting 85% of the strength that we're delivering. Who cares? Mm-hmm. That excuse, because we're over-designing, does not mean we ball and chain the industry to a subpar material that is going to wreak havoc on generations to come. And it's not even other generations, it's starting with our generation. Uh-huh. Now, here's the problem with that. It's not only we've been taught that it's our fault, the engineer's fault, we've been over-designing, right? And by the way, ACI 323, it tells you ready mix providers that you no longer have to over-design. That's the great thing about 323. If instead of having a brand new mix that requires at least 12 sets over a 3-year period to dictate your standard deviation, let's say if you don't have those 12 sets per ASTM C94 or ACI 214, you can, just do a 1200 PSI over design. You don't have to do any of that shit according to 323. You design it what they order it, and you're not going to be held accountable according to 323.
Yeah.
Right?
Which, in fact, you probably should be over-designing now.
Too late for that, really. So the problem with blaming, hey, it's the over-design issue. Now what we've done is anytime somebody puts up a fight that, it's the over-design issue, I mean, it almost like shuts people up. The argument cannot continue. Oh, okay. It's almost like saying somebody's racist. Uh-huh. Right? So the answer to that was, now that we've shut everybody up, we tell them, hey, we're taking the decision-making out of your possession. You are no longer allowed to make we're going to tell you how you're going to become low-carbon concrete. And it all started with us convincing the industry that we needed to go from prescriptive to performance. Mm-hmm. A long time ago, we not only convinced the industry that, hey, instead of dictating how much cement we need to make the ready mix providers use, we're going to tell them the performance that we want. that became a global and general concept that led to performance everything. It first went to performance-based admixtures. I'm not only going to give you a high range, I'm going to give you a high range that increases your slump life. I'm going to give you a high range that you can use in cold weather. Oh, man, don't sell me that. Just sell me a high range. Sell me an accelerator. Let me do the... No, we know. Send us your cement and we're going to... You have fly ash too. We're going to sell you a separate high range that you use just for your fly ash mixes. Somewhere along the line, the industry forgot we make performance based on prescription. Now, you couple that, it's always a coupling event with, it's your fault with over-design. You know, we gave you the chance to make the decision, and look what you did. Too much cement. We're going to take your cement, we're replacing it with less cement. And then, by July of 2025, if you don't conform to these GWP values that we based off of the Type 1-2 mixes, we didn't even base it off of the Type 1L. We based it off of the mixes that you used to use. We're going to take your federal funding. I'm afraid for the concrete pump companies. Gary Brown, who is probably top 3 of my favorite guests that you've had on the show.
Mm-hmm.
He once said, the concrete pump is the ultimate lie detector on a concrete job site. I think Matt Fonte, who really needs to be on your list of people on the show.
Okay.
Concrete paving guru.
Yeah.
Amazing. He would say the same thing about pavers. Pavers are the ultimate lie detector on a job site, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid for the concrete pumpers, not so much for the pavers, because I feel like they've been dealing with this for a few years now. But the Concrete Pumping Association should be looking at the impact of the ACI 323 and those GWP scores and how it's going to increase concrete pump pressures, maintenance cost, and fuel consumption.
Right.
Now, the DOTs are experiencing it now with the shortage in service life cycle.
Yeah.
So, how do we address that?
Address it overall. I mean, the best thing to do is to talk about it, but it doesn't seem to be, I don't know, doesn't seem to be, I mean, it's still out there, but it doesn't seem to be on the forefront of what people are worried about anymore.
I respectfully disagree. I think it's become a larger conversation. It started out with fly ash. Now we got shitty Type 1Ls. Now we got ACI 323. It's come to a head. And I wouldn't dismiss, and I don't think you are, the impact that the Concrete Logic podcast has.
No, what I'm saying.
Why did you do a The Rock eyebrow raise on that one? It's true.
Well, when you start listing all those things off, it seems like we've been dealing with something the entire time in the industry, right? So you go all the way back to I started in the early 2000s. So going back then was what? It was
high ranges,
and then there was the 2002-ish, I think, is when the last time performance specs was a kind of a thing. And
2002, no, that was like 2006, 7. Yeah, they had the whole P2P thing in Dallas.
Well, I also tell people that I lose track of time. Something I'd say was 2 years ago is really 4 years ago. It's happening to me now.
Sure.
But when you start rattling all those things off, it just seems like, and I think maybe Rich has said this before, is that we've always had challenges throughout, industry. There's not been one time where we're like, hey, everything is great in concrete. There's nothing that's challenging at this point. It's always changing.
I don't agree.
Well, that's good. I don't want you to come on here and agree with me all the time.
I do. That's the funny thing. I do agree with you a lot, and that's why I like these conversations.
Yeah.
But what I like even more than that is you push me back. Push back. I don't live in a world of definitives. I know that I haven't been alive long enough to know what concrete was like in the 30s. In the 20s, in the 40s, when we first started using hydraulic cements and first started using things like the tarantula curve and making cylinders. Like there's a wonderful book by Joseph E. Stevens called The Hoover Dam. And it got 3 awards, not because of the amazing pictures, although they're amazing pictures, but the great job this guy did talking about how this thing was built. And he gives an entire fucking soliloquy to the way the concrete was constructed and made and used. And I mean, the bidding wars. So yes, I think there's always been problems within the concrete industry. It's like getting a mortgage in New Jersey. The more people you get involved, the higher likelihood you're going to have of assholes. But the susceptibility to internal problems, while that was huge, external problems and people having their fingers on different buttons, like a congressman and federal grants having an impact on how our cement is made, was never really something that we had to contend with. And ACIs being written in a fashion that nobody has ever seen since the birth of this institution, because, and that's another discussion, who really wrote ACI 323? That's a funny one. It's almost like the Denver International Airport. Was it really the group, or was it one person who worked for ACI? How that happened, well, we had to do something before we were told to do it. What does that mean? Who tells us what to do? And your point that it seems like nobody's doing or saying anything about it. Remember, there are a few things you have to keep in mind when it comes to ready mix. And I really wish Rich was on the phone right now or the meeting with us, because he says it's so much better than I do. There is no line item on a contract that you have with a ready mix provider for research that goes into a little bit further in their yearly budget. They don't have a good practices evaluation thing either. Everything that happens at a ready mix plant happens live. Like they might go to a barbecue, they might go out to a lunch, they might have a pour with some blocks here and there. But the ultimate reality is they're emptying a silo and filling a silo, right? They're emptying tanks or filling tanks. It's not, hey, we get to try it out for a long period of time. I don't care what they tell you. There is no, what's that island that the folks at the university, there's no treat island for the ready mix plants and the ready mix producers. They don't have that time. Or you know what treat island is?
No.
I think it's off of the coast. I always get it wrong. It's either Texas or somewhere in Canada, right? It's this island that the great Mike Thomas, may his, soul rest in peace, used to use to do accelerated testing for ASR, for freeze thaw, for salting on concrete. And it's this wooden dock that the tide comes in and out like 8 times a day or some shit like that.
Oh, wow.
So, even Jason Weiss and Jason Eidecker, who Jason Eidecker used to work under Mike Thomas, they're building their own version of Treat Island, either in Texas or Oregon. I always get these places. You're not good with years' time. I'm not good with geography. That's why we're concrete people or construction people. None of us have that. Even the best concrete laboratories out there, And my favorite concrete laboratory is 1195 Cuevas Street. I think SRM owns that right now. And Speedway, their Columbia City plant, amazing facilities. They're only testing out 56, 90 days.
Yeah.
They're not testing out 10 years, 5 years. And that's the crazy thing. And I'll shut up after this. Why do you think, and you grew up with this too, if you came in the early 2000s, you were dealing with polycarboxylates, non-corrosive accelerators, corrosion inhibitors, high-volume fly ash mixes. Something engineers and ready-mix providers always said to us with new additives was, where's the concrete that's been in place for 5 years, 10 years? Oh, I want to see that before I trust this in my plant. How come we didn't do that?
We didn't have time.
Wanda Sykes brought up the fact that during Hurricane Sandy was in 9/11, where the hell was the emergency broadcast system? We've been hearing that thing on weekends since we were freaking puppies. And when we needed it the most, you don't see the emergency broadcast system. Where were these engineers that were the responsible individuals on the job site? Oh, unless it's been in for 5 years, I can't accept it. Where's the accelerated testing? 10 years? Oh, there's my stamp goes on this. Where the hell were they? They're just as much to blame as the flipping cement providers.
Yeah. Yeah, I would ask people that are listening to this podcast. It'd be interesting to hear who's going back and looking at what they poured 2 or 3 years ago. Contractors.
The contractors that are being called upon by their DOT folk.
Well, I know what you're saying has happened at those 6 DOTs, but I'm curious on the commercial side too.
Oh yeah.
If people are going back and looking at the concrete they placed 2 or 3 years ago,
you have to ask yourself,
yeah,
who gives a shit on the contract, on the private or commercial side?
Some people do.
Is it the residential folks, or is it the folks that put in?
I've worked for companies that, typically a concrete contractor has about a year warranty, right?
Right.
I've been part of companies that if a customer calls, 3 years after you poured something and say, hey, we got problems, they go out there and take care of it because that's who they are.
What type of customers make that phone call 3 years later?
What I'm thinking about were like state agency folks.
Okay, we're green. I say DOT, you see state agencies. Potato.
Well, I'm just thinking about when I heard it. Yeah, but I get you. Yeah, some of the commercial clients don't care because most
commercial.
Yeah. Probably.
I will tell you that I have 5 slabs. I was talking about this yesterday. I have 5 slabs in front of our shop here.
Not
a laboratory. It's a shop. SHOPPE.
Mm-hmm.
New Jersey, they don't like the name of laboratories. So we had 5 slabs, right?
Yeah.
Same concrete mix, different amount of fibers, so we staggered them, right? 3 were supposed to be placed on Friday. 2 were supposed to be placed on Monday. Have I told you this story?
No, I don't believe so.
Salesman comes out on Thursday. Nice guy. He says, hey, man, just to let you know, the 3 slabs you're going to get placed on Friday have cement from Turkey. And the 2 slabs you'll have on Monday, the cement will be from Greece. Are you cool with that, or do you want to push it Monday, Thursday, so you got the same cement? And I said, Is this like Greece, New Jersey, or Greece, New York? Like, he's like, no, this is cement over the big blue pond. I said, dude, you got cement in Nazareth, Pennsylvania that rocks and rolls. Like, what the heck? He's like, I don't know about the Nazareth thing, but it's much less expensive for us to import cement from overseas and not deal with the Type 1L issues than it is to deal with the Type 1L issues. And here's the thing. This wasn't a Jon Belkowitz 10,000 PSI mix design. This was a 3,500 PSI air and train exterior flatwork mix that had a water cementitious ratio design of 0.55. Delivered, it was 0.57. And concrete looks great. Concrete looks like there is not a crack in it. There's no steel. They're 45 feet long. They're 5 feet wide, 5 inches thick, and they're placed on rock, like blue chip. Not a single crack. Gorgeous slabs. Been there for 3 years.
Yeah.
So there was a post that I got yesterday, or I interacted with yesterday from admixture salesman. And his thing was, how can you ignore the benefit of type 1L cements? Who cares about the cost? And my response was, I think it's people care about the expense that they're shelling out after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The damage. What did he say? Well, too bad. Type 1L cements are here to stay. Are they? I'm not speaking to Baker and your critical path of construction and any of your concrete projects, because I don't know. But the major general contractors that we work with are importing and siloing in major storage facilities their own cement. There is 60,000 tons coming into Newark Harbor Port a month. And in Port of Galveston, there's 200,000 tons of cement coming in a month. Like, type 1L cements are not here to stay. And I guess this is my closing message for your subscribers and your listeners. First of all, if you don't know how to deal with this, there are many different talks on the Concrete Logic podcast that subtly talk about how to deal with problems like the type 1L cement conversion, right? Good concrete practices. Well, whether you're listening to Bill Coolish, Joe Shetterly, Robert Higgins, if you're not a member, I recommend it. And if you're not a sponsor, don't be a prick. Sponsor. But there are other avenues, especially if you're a DOT person. You have the power to say what goes in your concrete, because ultimately you're the one who stamps off on it. And if you don't want type 1L cement, you can specify you can't use type 1L cement. It's crazy, I know. Test me on it. I don't expect any of your listeners to believe me.
Yeah.
Try it out. What's the worst that can happen? You're going to have a meeting with the cement provider here in the States. They're going to take you out for a nice lunch. And they might give you a nice T-shirt.
Yeah. The pushback that I've heard so far is they'll just cost you.
And what is the cost comparable to?
I know. That's the whole point of this thing, is they're just look at the initial cost and not the cost 2 or 3 years down the road.
2 or 3 years down the road, you're ripping and replacing, let's say it's only a mile of highway, 12 inches thick, 14 inches thick pavement, 1 lane in either direction. You're looking at least 2.5 times your original cost if you're ripping and replacing. And where the hell are you going to put that concrete that you weren't supposed to put until like 2030, or if you're listening to Matt Adams, 100 years down the road? That's the great thing about designing a 100-year structure. You only have to design it once instead of designing a 50-year structure twice.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see what we get out of this one. See what people say.
Hopefully, my griping and complaining, and you're so calm and collected, and that's the balance, Seth. Like, I'm a freaking Chihuahua, and you're like a freaking, German Shepherd, right? I'm a Jack Russell Terrier. I like to freaking bite rats and shake the shit out of them, right? And you're just all noble, right? I think that's the good balance that we bring, that I bring the energy to, holy shit, watch them out.
Yeah.
And okay, now that we have the facts, John, if they are facts, let's break them down to its basics and how do we address these? So I hope that through the craziness on my side and the calm attitude on Seth, that your subscribers and your listeners got something out of this.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I appreciate you coming on. I'll put a link to your article because I think that's important for people to take a look at and read. And people that have been listening to the podcast, you've heard a lot of it, but it's good to get a refresher.
Well, and plus, I talk about concrete 6 days out of the week. That seventh day, I leave for God and my family. But if somebody has a problem and they don't know who to reach out to, like, we offer many services to include concrete testing, consulting, petrography, but we also talk to people. And right now, that's what people need. Like, they just need to be heard and they need to understand they're not alone. And I sound like an AA meeting, but hey, man, there's some real freaking problems that are going to cost the taxpayer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Jon, thank you for coming back on the show. And folks, until next time, let's keep it concrete.